The stars were silent, cold, and endless, stretching across black space like scattered diamonds. Among them floated a wreck twisted metal, shattered walls, and scorched lights. It had once been a proud station, Quran 6, where leaders of alien worlds had gathered to speak of peace. Now, it was a graveyard, drifting near the quiet planet Jeruin. Months had passed since it went dark. Back! Reports said it was an accident. Others whispered it was a slathery attack, but the Galactic Council closed the case quickly.
Oh.
No survivors were ever found, and no signals came from it again. Until one day, a faint sound echoed from inside, a soft cry. A sound so small, so easy to miss that no other ship noticed, but a human did. Her name was Rhea Morgan. She was alone on her scout vessel, Nova Blade, searching the outer belts for scrap, fuel, or maybe something she could sell. Her scanner, old and half-broken, blinked once, then went still. Her audio receiver picked up something strange, a voice, high and trembling, like a melody lost in static. Rhea sat still in her seat, eyes narrowed. Her fingers hovered over the controls. Most pilots would have ignored it. Space was full of noise, solar flares, ghost signals, echoes of past battles. But this was different. It didn't sound like static or data. It sounded alive. Something inside her stirred. The same instinct that had kept her alive during the siege of Teller Prime. Without hesitation, she turned her ship toward the ruined station. As her vessel neared Carrion 6, it became clear the station had taken a brutal hit. The outer hull was ripped open in several places. Fires had long since burned out. No light shone through the windows. It looked like a corpse in orbit. She docked her ship manually, slipping through a breach in the docking ring. The silence was thick. Her boots echoed on the floor as she stepped into the dark corridors, carrying only a flashlight and a plasma cutter. The air was thin, but breathable. Emergency power hummed faintly in some parts. Wires hung like vines from the ceiling, and the walls were covered in burn marks. She moved slowly, following the cry that pulsed through her earpiece. It stopped sometimes, only to return again, faint and distant, like it was afraid. She passed. Broken doors, overturned chairs, and security drones with dead eyes. There were signs of battle claw marks on the metal, scorch lines from plasma blasts, and deep slashes across the walls. She didn't speak, she only listened. Finally, in the lower level of the diplomatic wing, she found it. A half-crushed escape pod was jammed into a corner, its hatch bent and sparking. She crawled toward it and shone her light inside. There, tucked into a corner under shattered panels, was a child. It wasn't human. It had thin arms and legs, golden skin that shimmered like sunlight, and large glowing eyes full of fear. Its clothes were torn. One arm was bruised and wrapped tightly around its knees. The moment her light touched it, the child flinched and let out a soft sob. Rhea didn't move closer right away. She crouched, slowly removing her helmet so it could see her face. "Hey," she said gently, her voice soft in the dark. "You're okay now." The child looked at her, trembling. It spoke in strange tones, clicks, hums, and a few words from the ancient trade tongue. It didn't say its name, but Rhea understood. One thing clearly: it had been hiding. Alone. Afraid. Waiting for someone to find it. And no one came. Not its own people. Not the Great Council. Not even the robots that once cleaned the halls. Just silence. Rhea pulled off her jacket and slowly wrapped it around the small frame. The child didn't resist. It leaned into her, exhausted. Her heart ached. As she turned to leave, her ship's AI buzzed in her ear. Motion detected. Large mass approaching. Power signature unknown. Rhea cursed under her breath and looked up at the broken ceiling. Something had seen her. Something had returned. Her grip tightened around the child. "Hold on," she whispered. "We're getting out of here." Cry had led her to the child, but it had also drawn attention. Something ancient and cruel still hunted, and now it knew someone had found what it lost. Rhea rushed back through the station, heart pounding, arms holding the only living soul on Carrion 6. The silence was gone. Now it was the beginning of something far bigger. Something only a human had heard, and now something only a human would face. Rhea didn't stop to rest. She carried the alien child close to her chest as she ran through the cold, broken hallways of the ruined station. The soft sobs had stopped, but she could feel the child shaking against her. The dim emergency lights flickered above her as she moved quickly, boots crunching over shattered glass and loose wires. Her mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear: the child had survived something terrible. Someone or something was coming back for it. She reached the docking bay where her small scout ship, the Nova Blade, waited. The ship's AI greeted her with urgent warnings. A fast-moving vessel was heading toward them at high speed. Too big to be a patrol craft and not marked as any known ship from the Alliance. Rhea didn't wait to identify it. She climbed into the cockpit, placed the child carefully in the co-pilot seat, and strapped herself in. The child stared out the window, wide-eyed and silent, still wrapped in her old flight jacket. As soon as the ship's engines came to life, the scanner screamed. A huge shadow appeared beyond the asteroid belt, long and jagged like a giant claw, darker than space itself. It was not just a ship, it was a hunter. Rhea pulled the controls and launched the Nova Blade into full thrust, breaking away from the wreckage of Karin 6 as plasma blasts rained down behind them. The child cried out, covering its ears. The ship shuddered under the pressure. Warning lights flashing red as shields dropped to half, she dodged between rocks and debris. Weaving through the wreck of an old mining field nearby, the enemy ship kept chasing. No signal came from it. Number demands no voice. Just a constant stream of fire and death. It was like being hunted by a ghost with a burning sword. Rhea pushed her ship harder, her eyes focused, jaw tight. She'd faced death before, but not like this. She looked at the child beside her, its hands gripping the seat. It didn't cry anymore. It just watched her, trusted her. She tapped into emergency comms and sent a wide-range distress call on all known frequencies. No one replied. No aid, just silence. It reminded her of the war days, when Earth's ships had cried for help that never came. She gritted her teeth and whispered to herself, "Of course we're alone." Still, she didn't slow down. She wouldn't let them have the child. The Nova Blade took a hard hit on the left engine, and the ship lurched. Rhea rerouted power to the shields and steered toward a dense asteroid belt. Maybe she could lose them there, at least for a while. She flew low, skimming the edges of spinning rocks, dodging wrecks and frozen husks of old battles. The enemy fired again, blowing apart a nearby asteroid and showering her ship in debris. Sparks flew across her dashboard. Oxygen levels dropped slightly. Alarms buzzed. The child turned and reached for her hand. She didn't know how, but the moment its fingers touched hers, her mind flashed. In a second, she saw images blurry, fast, and strange. She saw the same alien ship, but inside it, a dark room, rows of creatures strapped to walls. Some were alive, others silent. Then the child again, running, hiding, escaping in the escape pod just before the explosion on Karin 6. The image ended, and she gasped. The child's eyes glowed gently, and it looked into hers, as if saying, "Now you understand." It wasn't just hunted because it was important. It had seen something. It had survived something no one else had. And whatever power it had, it could share memories. Maybe more. Rhea nodded slowly, her breath shaking. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "I promise." A warning flashed again, multiple heat signatures approaching fast. More. Ships. The hunter hadn't come alone. She had to think fast. Her ship couldn't survive another direct hit. She turned toward a hidden tunnel inside the asteroid field a shortcut miners once used long ago. It was dangerous, unstable, and too narrow for bigger ships to follow easily. But Rhea wasn't a normal pilot. She cut her speed just enough to drift between the walls, sparks flying off the hull as the ship scraped the sides. Behind them, one of the hunter ships tried to follow and exploded against the rocks. Another one veered off, trying a different path. Her route was working. She grinned, breathing hard. Not today. After several tense minutes, she cleared the tunnel and burst into open space again. Ahead in the distance shimmered the faint Lights of New Argos, a hidden colony built by old Earth veterans who never stopped fighting. It was their last hope. She sent a direct ping, voice shaky. This is Captain Rhea Morgan of the Nova Blade. I'm under attack by unknown hostiles. I have a survivor young alien, possibly telepathic. Requesting cover now. There was a pause. Then a reply came, strong and clear. Copy that, Captain. Hold position. Help is coming. Rhea sighed in relief as the first Earth warship rose from the shadow of the moon, its cannons glowing. Hot, ready to fight. For the first time in hours, she let herself breathe. The child looked at her again and smiled softly. She smiled back. They weren't out yet, but they had made it this far together, and she would keep fighting because no one else had heard the child cry, but she had, and she would not stop until it was safe. The stars above New Argos lit up as warships burst from their hiding places, forming a line between Rhea's damaged ship and the enemy that chased her. The old Earth dreadnought USS Tyrant, massive and scarred from battles long past, led the defense. Its heavy guns opened fire, sending waves of missiles and plasma rounds toward the approaching shadows. The Slathery ships, long and sharp like blades, twisted to avoid the blasts, but a few were hit and exploded in silent bursts. Afire, Rhea's hands gripped the controls as she guided the Nova Blade into the landing bay of New Argos. Sparks flew from her left engine. Smoke filled the cockpit. The ship's AI buzzed weakly as systems failed one by one. She didn't care. She had one goal now: get the child to safety. As the landing gear touched down, the bay doors closed behind them, sealing them off from the chaos outside. The moment the ramp lowered, medics and guards rushed forward. Rhea stepped down slowly, holding the alien child close. The child clung to her, eyes wide, head turning to take in the strange humans surrounding them. One of the officers, a tall man with a gray beard and metal arm, saluted her. "Captain Morgan, heard you were dead?" Rhea gave a tired smirk. Not yet. They took her to the command center where glowing screens showed the space battle. Still raging above the moon, the Slathery ships weren't retreating, were pushing harder like they wanted something badly. Rhea knew what. She turned to Commander Knox, leader of New Argos and one of the last heroes of Earth's final war. "They're after the kid," she said. "It's not random. It's a hunt." Knox studied the child, who stood quietly near Rhea, watching everything. "That thing a weapon?" he asked. "No," Rhea said, "but it knows something." "Think it saw what the Slathery were doing before they attacked Karin 6? It escaped." Knox's eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" Rhea looked down at the child, who slowly raised its hand and touched the table. A wave of light flowed from its fingers, forming a glowing shape in the air. It was a memory, fuzzy, shaking, but clear enough to show rows of alien beings strapped into walls, their minds wired into machines. Their energy was being drained, their thoughts stolen. The Slathery were not just conquerors, they were parasites, using other species as fuel for their swarm. And the child had escaped with that knowledge. Ox leaned back, his face pale. "If they want the kid this badly, then whatever's inside it, it's a threat to them." Rhea nodded. "We need to protect it. We need to fight back." As repairs began on her ship, Rhea stayed close to the child. She sat beside it in the medical wing, watching it sleep under a heat lamp. The child was small, no older than 6 by human years, and its body was thin and fragile. But something in its mind was powerful. God had shown her not just images, but feelings, fear, loneliness, pain, and a deep need to be heard. Rhea thought about all the other species that must have cried for help before being swallowed by the Slathery swarm, and how no one had listened. Now she had, and she would not stop. Outside, the battle shifted. The Slathery sent in more ships. A massive one appeared, larger than any seen before, shaped like a coiled serpent of metal and bone. Its presence blocked out the stars. Rhea's comlink buzzed again. "Captain, we need you in the war room." She stood, gently placing a blanket over the sleeping child, then marched back to the center of command. Inside, the mood was tense. Officers barked out orders. Fighters launched in waves. Nox looked at her with hard eyes. They're not backing off. This isn't just about the child. They want to silence what it knows before the rest of the galaxy finds out. Rhea nodded. Then we make sure it doesn't die with us. She stepped forward and pointed at the incoming fleet on the war screen. Let me lead a team. I'll get close to their hive ship. If we can get the child's memory core near it, maybe we can disrupt their network. Shut them down. Even for a second. Nox hesitated.
That's
Suicide. Rhea shrugged. So, was staying alive after Teller Prime? Didn't stop me then. Nox finally gave a sharp nod. Then we go all in. Preparation began fast. Engineers worked around the clock to patch up the Nova Blade, reinforcing its shields and arming it with weapons it hadn't carried in years. Other pilots joined Rhea's mission, old war dogs and young volunteers alike. They knew the risk. They also knew what would happen if the Slattery won. As the ships powered up, the child came to Rhea and looked into her eyes. It didn't speak with words, but it placed its hand on her chest and nodded once. It trusted her. She knelt down and smiled. We're going to end this. The hangar shook as another blast hit the outer defenses. But inside that moment, between the woman and the alien child, there was stillness, a promise. That as long as a human heard the cry of the helpless, the fight was not over, and Rhea Morgan was not done fighting. The sky above New Argos turned red as the Slattery flagship moved into position, its massive body spreading across the stars like a shadow with claws. Inside the hangar, Rhea stood at the base of her ship, checking the final systems with quick, trained hands. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from focus. Around her, 3 other pilots suited up veterans from Earth's resistance days, each flying a ship older than the war itself, but held together with care and grit. They were called the Echo Wing, a nickname earned from a mission long ago when they vanished into enemy space and returned with proof of the Slattery's first hive experiments. Rhea now led them on another suicide run, but this time they weren't just scouting. This time they had a purpose. In the cargo bay behind her seat, the alien child waited quietly, tucked into a padded pod filled with soft light. Connected to the pod was a signal Corin uplink, crafted by New Argos. Engineers that could amplify the child's memories and send them directly into enemy frequencies. It was dangerous, untested, and it might be the only way to disrupt the Slattery network. Rhea climbed into the Nova Blade, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Time to wake up the hive." The hangar doors opened, and 4 ships launched into the storm of battle, flying low through debris fields and wreckage. Above them, larger Earth warships fired volley after volley, keeping the main Slattery fleet busy. Rhea's squad slipped beneath radar, moving fast and quiet like ghosts. But the Slattery weren't fools. As they neared the hive ship, long black drones detached from its surface, hundreds of them, spinning like blades as they closed in. The first clash was brutal. Rhea's wingmate cutter banked right and dropped a charge that scattered the swarm, giving them a second to breathe. But the swarm closed again, faster this time. Rhea focused on the path ahead. She didn't fire unless she had to. Her goal wasn't to fight, it was to reach the hive core and deliver the child's signal. Behind her, the child sat calm, its eyes glowing faintly. Rhea felt its presence in her head like a calm voice whispering through panic. She'd never known anything so strange and peaceful in battle. One of the echoing ships was hit. Flames burst from its wing, spinning it out of control. Rhea winced as it vanished into the void. No time to mourn.
oh, no time to slow down.
They pushed forward, entering a narrow trench across the hive ship's outer armor. The surface of the ship moved like it was alive, breathing, reacting to their presence. Turrets rose. Energy beams shot across the trench. Rhea dodged left, then down, flying inches from the walls. Almost there, she muttered, watching the signal tracker blink faster. Just beyond the curve was the perfect spot. An exposed comms relay, pulsing like a beating heart. She brought the Nova Blade to a hover above it, or in position, she said into the comms. Start the transfer. Inside the pod, the child sat up, eyes glowing brighter. The signal beam activated, reaching out toward the relay like a thread of light. The moment it touched the Slathery ship, everything shook. The hive screamed. Psychic pulse exploded through space. Rhea cried out, clutching her head as visions flooded in pain. Confusion, billions of thoughts all tangled together. The hive was reacting, panicking, trying to block the signal. But it was too late. The child's memories streamed into the ship, showing the truth of what the Slathery had done to others, exposing their theft, their cruelty, their lies. All across the battlefield, Slathery ships faltered. Some turned on each other, some simply froze, caught in the storm of memory and fear. Earth ships pushed forward, striking hard. Rhea's comlink buzzed wildly shouts of victory, surprise, chaos. But her focus stayed on the beam. Just a little longer, she said through clenched teeth. A sudden jolt shook her ship. One last drone had made it through, latched onto the side of the Nova blade, drilling through the hole. Flew. Systems blinked out. Rhea unstrapped and pulled her sidearm, crawling through smoke toward the breach. The drone broke through with metal claws, screeching. The child screamed. Rhea raised her pistol and fired twice, hitting its eye. It stumbled, then lunged. She tackled it with a roar, slamming it back against the wall. The airlock seal snapped shut just before it dragged her out, and the drone was sucked into space. She dropped to the floor, coughing. Blood dripped from her forehead. "We're okay," she said, gasping. "We're okay." The signal beam ended, the pod dimmed. The child fell back, unconscious but breathing. Outside, the hive ship shook, its surface cracking. Energy bursts erupted from within. The echo wing shouted across comms. "It's breaking apart. We need to move." Rhea grabbed the controls and turned the ship around, engines burning hot as they flew away from the collapsing monster. The Slathery flagship exploded in a massive wave of light, spreading debris across the battlefield. The swarm scattered. Some vanished. Others surrendered. Humanity had hit them in the mind, and they were not ready.
Back in orbit?
Over New Argos, cheers filled the channels. Earth's fleet had survived. The Slathery had fallen back. Rhea landed the Nova blade in a smoking trail of sparks. Medics rushed in, but she waved them off. She went straight to the pod and lifted the child into her arms. Its eyes opened slowly. She smiled down at it. "You did it," she whispered. The child reached up and gently touched her cheek, tired but smiling. And all around them, the sound of battle was replaced by the sound of victory. But deep down, Rhea knew it wasn't over yet, not fully, not until the whole galaxy heard what this child had shown, not until no cry like that ever went unheard again. ChatGPT said, New Argos buzzed with life as people repaired ships, tended to the wounded, and cleared the wreckage from the battle. The Slathery had pulled back, their hive ship destroyed, but no one believed the war was truly over. Rhea stood quietly on a high platform, watching the horizon beyond the moon's metal towers. The child sat beside her, wrapped in a fresh blanket, its glowing eyes calm but tired. Every now and then, it looked up at the stars, as if listening to something far away. They had struck a blow to the enemy, yes, but it was only a warning shot. Deeper in space, the rest of the Slathery swarm still waited. And now they knew Earth had something dangerous, a child who could destroy their lives. Rhea had seen this before. When a tyrant bleeds, they don't surrender, they roar. Knew they were coming back, and this time they would bring everything they had. Nox called a meeting in the war room, inviting leaders from distant colonies, hidden bases, and allied species who once stayed silent. The child's memory burst had been shared through emergency channels, and now the galaxy knew the truth. No one could ignore it. Not anymore. Some delegates arrived angry, ashamed they hadn't acted sooner. Others were afraid, ready to run, but a few were ready to fight. Rhea stood before them all and spoke plainly. You all heard the scream. You saw what they did. You know what they are. So ask yourself, if we don't stand now, when will we? The room fell into silence, then the murmur of support grew. Plans formed quickly. Nox offered New Argos as the center of command. Earth sent its finest engineers to rebuild the fleet. Even distant species like the glass-skinned Kellerans and the stone-bodied Thrask sent ships and warriors. The child's gift had united them through fear and fire. Rhea returned to her quarters later that night, too tired to sleep. She stared at a hall of her old squad of ones who didn't make it past Earth's last war. She had sworn never to lead another fight like that. But now she had no choice. The child needed her, and the galaxy needed someone who wouldn't break. A knock at the door pulled her back. It was the child. Somehow it had slipped past the guards, silent as ever. It climbed onto her bunk and looked into her eyes. For a moment it didn't speak or project anything. It just laid its head on her shoulder and closed its eyes. Rhea didn't move. She just let it rest. The next morning, an alert woke the base. A signal had been detected, massive energy pulses near the dark edge of the star system. The swarm was gathering. Tens of thousands of ships, forming a cloud that swallowed light. It was a fleet meant not for victory, but for extinction. Rhea suited up and marched into the hangar, already calling out orders. She didn't hesitate. We move before they do. We hit them at the edge. Take out their scouts, cut their comms. If we wait, we die sitting. Nox backed her. They mobilized fast. Dozens of ships launched in waves, scattering across the system. Rhea led the vanguard. Her ship, still scratched and scorched, now carried a stronger shield, boosted engines. And the child strapped into a support seat with a new neural link. The child no longer cried. It understood the mission. They all did. As they approached the system's edge, the stars faded, hidden behind a wall of dark. Slothery scout ships waited ahead, waiting to report back. But they never got the chance. Rhea gave the order, and her fleet opened fire. The ambush was clean and fast. Slothery scouts exploded under precision strikes. Signal towers were blasted into dust. Rhea's voice echoed across the comms, calm but sharp. We don't give them time to think. The child reached out again with its power, sending a pulse of confusion into the swarm, clouding their vision, making them fire at their own ships. The humans moved through like blades in a storm. But it couldn't last. The main swarm started to respond. Bigger ships turned toward them. More drones launched. The darkness thickened. The vanguard began to fall back, but not before planting signal beacons deep into the swarm's edge, marking weak points, relaying paths for the full fleet. As they turned back, the Slothery sent a final strike to stop them. A heavy carrier launched a barrage of energy lances. One struck too close. Rhea's ship spun, alarms screaming. The child cried out, and Rhea caught it before it fell. Hold on, she whispered, guiding the ship through burning debris and shattered drones. The fleet returned to New Argos, battered but alive. Their strike had worked. The swarm had been caught off guard. Now Earth and its allies had maps, data, and something more important, hope. Rhea stepped off her ship with the child in her arms. People rushed forward, cheering, hugging, shouting her name. She didn't stop for praise. She carried the child straight to the command platform and looked out at the waiting fleet. They're coming, she said loudly. But now we're ready. Around her, lights glowed across hundreds of ships. Engineers prepped cannons, pilots checked armor, and somewhere beyond the stars, the swarm howled in fury. But this time, they would not face a silent galaxy. They would face humans who had heard the cryand, answered it with fire. The stars above New Argos vanished as the Slothery swarm arrived, black tide covering the sky with thousands of ships in perfect formation. Their dreadnoughts, shaped like jagged blades, drifted forward slowly, pulsing with dark energy. Swarm didn't speak, didn't send messages, didn't warn. They came to a race. Across the surface of the moon, alarms blared. Every base, tower, and cannon powered up at once. Humans and their allies stood ready. The Kellerans, with glowing crystal armor, lined up beside Earth's Marines. The Thrask, heavy like walking tanks, slammed their fists together and grunted. In unity, on the main command ship, Rhea stood at the center of the bridge, her jaw tight. Her eyes watched the enemy fleet without blinking. She didn't need a strategy board. She knew this would come down to one thing: survive long enough to land the final blow. Behind her, the child sat in the signal chamber, calm and focused. It wore a special headset now, one built by humans and alien engineers together. When activated, it would send a wave of truth across every ship, reaching into the slothery hive. Mind once more. That was their weapon, hope, wrapped in memory, fired like a cannon. As the enemy moved, the first wave hit. Small slathery attack ships, fast and spiked like insects, swarmed toward the moon's defense grid. Lasers and plasma beams lit up the space between. Earth fighters rushed out to meet them. Explosions lit the dark. Rhea's fleet lifted off from the hangars, her ship leading the main strike force. She barked orders into the Cumser voice, steady even as chaos unfolded. Hold formation. Target their relays. Protect the signal tower. One by one, Earth ships began punching holes in the enemy lines, carving a path through the swarm. But the Slathery adapted quickly. They sent drones, shaped like spinning blades, slicing through the edges of the fleet. One allied ship, a Thrask carrier, took a hit and exploded, the shockwave throwing others off course. Rhea gritted her teeth and pushed forward. She had no time for grief. This was war. She focused on the next step. Closer to the swarm's heart, slothery battleships began to rise. Their hulls shifted, changing shape like liquid metal, weapons emerging from hidden slots. They fired massive energy bursts that bent space around them. Earth's main battleships responded with railguns and quantum missiles. The system. The space around the moon looked like fire and smoke in zero gravity. Amid it all, Rhea's ship carried the child closer and closer to the signal relay. They had to reach it. Only from there could the signal be broadcast with full power. Suddenly, a dark shape moved fast to fast. A slattery assassin drone, shaped like a spear, struck the ship hard. The hull cracked. Lights flickered. Inside, the child fell from the seat, bleeding from the nose. Rhea turned and rushed to it. Catching the small body in her arms, "Stay with me," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. She placed the child back into the signal pod and turned on the auto-stabilizers. "You're stronger than them," she said. "It's just a little longer." The ship limped toward the tower. Explosions rocked it from all sides. Then came the worst, the slothery flagship, massive and glowing red at the core, turned toward them. It fired a beam that split through 3 ships, then aimed directly at Rhea's vessel. She screamed into the Cums. "Shield everything we have. All power to forward. Defense." But they couldn't stop it. The beam fired and then something unexpected happened. A wall of blue light appeared, blocking the blast. A dozen allied ships had moved in front of Rhea's ship, forming a living shield. They took the hit, and all of them were destroyed in a blaze of light. Rhea stared in shock. Her ship had survived. The path to the tower was open. She pushed the engine forward, eyes burning. "We won't waste your sacrifice." The ship landed rough on the tower platform, fire trailing behind. Rhea burst from the cockpit, carrying the child in her arms. The platform shook with the force of nearby hits. She ran into the control room and dropped the child into the signal cradle. Wires snapped into place. Lights turned green. "Nox's voice echoed in her ear. Are you sure you want to do this? Once the signal begins, they'll all come for you." Rhea looked down at the child. "We're already here. Let's finish it." She flipped the switch. A deep hum filled the room. The child's eyes opened wide. A soft glow rose from its body, spreading through the wires, the tower, the air. A pulse of memory exploded from the signal core. It raced across space like a tidal wave, reaching enemy mines in seconds. Slothery ships jerked mid-flight. Some shut down completely. Others began turning in confusion, firing randomly. Inside the Hive network, the child showed them everything what it had seen, what had been done to it, the faces of the dead, the screams of other children. It showed them mercy to how the humans had listened when no one else did. The slothery Hive fractured. Some screamed, some ran. Some simply fell silent. But the flagship came forward still, its core growing hotter, burning red. it wasn't giving up. It powered its main cannon again, aiming to destroy the tower and end the child's signal. Rhea stood in front of the control panel, gun in hand, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. Then a deep voice crackled through the comms. "We see the truth now, and we stand with you." It was a Slathery rebel ship one of the mines freed by the signal, and it wasn't alone. A group of converted Slathery ships rose from within the swarm and turned on the flagship. They fired in unison, striking its core. The flagship exploded in a violent storm of red light. Rhea dropped to her knees, holding the child tightly. All across the sky, the swarm broke apart. Some fled, some surrendered. Some simply stopped moving. And for the first time, the war didn't feel endless. It felt like hope. The battlefield slowly fell quiet, drifting through the smoke and broken stars like a dream. The enemy had been shattered. Wrecked Slathery ships spun lifeless in orbit, their black metal husks glowing with cracks from internal collapse. Allied fleets circled together, battered but alive, their lights blinking softly in the dark. Across the broken surface of New Argos, cheers began to rise, small and unsure at first, then growing louder. Spreading through every base and station, Rhea stood on the signal tower, arms wrapped around the child who now lay unconscious but breathing. Her body ached, her suit torn, her hands streaked with blood and carbon, but she didn't care. They had survived the worst. She looked up at the sky, where fire still flickered among the stars, and let herself breathe. Around her, technicians ran into the tower room, checking systems and calling out updates. Knox's voice came through her, "Come again," cracked with emotion. "You did it, Rhea. You stopped them." She shook her head softly and whispered, "No. We did." As the survivors gathered, emergency ships brought in the wounded. Hundreds of soldiers helped each other from ruined crafts. Some were missing limbs. Some had faces too tired to even speak. But they were alive. Thrask medics helped human pilots. Kelleran engineers began fixing power grids. The war had burned everyone, but now they stood together. Rhea carried the child to a recovery chamber in the command center. It slept deeply, its body still glowing faintly from the strain of the signal. Medical teams scanned it, puzzled by its condition, but amazed it had survived such power. A Kelleran healer approached Rhea quietly and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It will live, but it will need time. What it carried, no mind should ever have to bear." Rhea nodded and sat beside the chamber, watching the child breathe slowly. For the first time in years, she felt something inside her heart soften. Over the next few days, messages began to flood in from across the galaxy. Hidden colonies once silent sent words of gratitude and support. Former enemies called for peace. Talks. Even planets once under the Slathery's shadow began rising up. Encouraged by what had happened at New Argos, the child's signal had done more than end, and Battlet had pulled back the curtain. Entire species now saw the truth of what they had feared. And now they were angry, united, ready to fight not just for survival, but for justice. Rhea stood in front of the Allied Council, which had gathered in a half-destroyed chamber still. Smelling of smoke, she wore no armor, no medals. Just her worn pilot jacket. Her voice was calm but firm. "This isn't over. The swarm will rebuild. There are still hives out there, still commanders who didn't hear the signal, but now they'll be hunted, not feared." The council erupted in cheers and fist-banging. Leaders stood and pledged resources, ships, soldiers. The galaxy was changing, and humanity once considered young and reckless was now seen as something else. A fire that could not be put out. Rhea received visitors from all over. Veterans brought her flags from ruined homeworlds. Children brought flowers and glowing beads. Some simply came to say thank you. She accepted it all humbly, but spent most of her time near the child. Slowly, it began to wake more often. It didn't speak much, but it would sit by the window, staring at the stars. Sometimes it smiled, though its eyes always looked far away, like it remembered things no one should. One night, as the moon of New Argos passed into the planet's shadow, the power flickered and the lights dimmed. Rhea woke with a start. She walked to the command deck where a message waited. A new signal faint, but Rial had come through from deep space. It wasn't hostile. It was something else. Ancient, lost, forgotten. Nox studied it with narrowed eyes. Coordinates only. No message. No language. Rhea stared at the glowing dot on the screen, far beyond explored space. "Hey, it's calling us," she said softly. The child appeared behind her, staring at the same screen. Its eyes shimmered like distant suns, and then it pointed. The next morning, Rhea called a meeting of the fleet's senior captains. She told them everything. The battle was over. A greater mystery waited. If someone or something had placed that child into the heart of the swarm, if they had built it to carry such memory and pain, then they were not just survivors. They were architects. "We need to find them," Rhea said. "Not just for answers, for protection. Because if they created that child, they may know how to end the swarm completely. Or worse, someone else might find them first." The council was split. Some urged rest, recovery, rebuilding. Others feared the unknown. But a vote was taken, and the result was clear. Rhea would lead a deep space mission. Small, fast fleet. Would go volunteers only. The rest would stay and guard the new alliance. As Rhea prepared, the child handed her something. A drawing. Simple, made with crayons and light sticks. It showed her ship, flying toward a giant star, with many hands. Reaching out to it, Rhea held the picture gently. "You remember something, don't you?" The child nodded slowly, then "Show me the way." That evening, under the broken sky of New Argos, Rhea's fleet lifted off. The engines roared, the stars bent, and the human who once answered a single child's cry now flew into the unknown with the galaxy watching behind her, and something greater waiting ahead. The stars stretched and bent as Rhea's small fleet jumped into deep space, leaving behind the broken moons of New Argos and the flickering lights of the Allied systems. The journey ahead was cold, silent, and long far beyond mapped territory, where old star charts held only question marks. Every ship in the fleet ran silent drives, shields tight, scanning for the unknown. Rhea stood at the bridge window of her cruiser, her hand resting gently on the child's shoulder as it sat quietly. Beside her, eyes wide and focused. It hadn't spoken much since they left, but it had guided them through empty systems, always pointing before the next jump, always knowing where to go. They passed abandoned worlds' planets that seemed once alive, now dead and cracked. They passed derelict ships, drifting like skeletons in the dark, their lights long gone. And yet the child kept pointing forward, deeper, toward something not yet seen. That tension grew inside the crew, whispers of fear in the mess halls. No one spoke. It loudly, but they all felt it. Something waited ahead, something old and heavy, like the universe holding its breath. Then they reached the place. A region of space surrounded by a strange mist, like fog swirling through stars. No systems, no light. Only silence and dark matter clouds, thicker than anything they'd ever seen. The moment they entered, the ship's instruments began to fail. Compass needles spun, star maps scrambled, engines groaned. One ship lost power completely, and Rhea had to tow it in with tractor beams. Nox, on the science deck, tried to explain it. "There's something here, something bending time or memory or thought. I don't know how else to say it. This place isn't empty. It's alive, or haunted." Rhea didn't respond. She just looked at the child. The child nodded once. They were close. Hours passed. Then a shape began to appear, through the fog, a massive structure, floating in the void. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a planet. It was both. Or neither. It looked like a broken cathedral the size of a moon, made of stone and metal, glowing faintly with lights that flickered like dying stars.
Ow!
Its surface was carved with ancient symbols no one could read. As the fleet approached, the child stood up slowly and placed its hand on the glass. Rhea felt a pulse, like a memory not hers, whispering in her mind. Then the child spoke softly, but clear. "They're still here." Those words froze the entire bridge. The fleet moved closer, docking. Arms extended from the strange structure, wrapping gently around Rhea's ship, guiding it in like a mother's hand. The crew entered slowly, weapons ready but lowered. Inside, the halls were tall and echoing, filled with strange light that pulsed with no clear source. Gravity worked but sideways. Walls folded into floors, time felt loose. But at the heart of the temple was a chamber around and wide, with thrones made of crystal, each one empty but humming with energy. The child walked to the center and placed its hand on a glowing pedestal. Lights shot out, filling the room with images, worlds being born, stars exploding, great beings of light creating life with a single thought. The crew watched, stunned. Rex fell to his knees. This isn't a ruin. This is where they made everything. The images showed a race of ancient beings tall, faceless, bright like suns. They were the first makers, the ones who had crafted galaxies and seeded life across the stars. They had vanished long ago, leaving behind guardians. To protect balance, the child was one of them, created from memory, not flesh, shaped to remind others of what was forgotten. The swarm had found it, tried to use it, failed to understand it. Now it had come home. The energy in the room rose, then settled. A final vision appeared. A new threat, far beyond even the Slatheria shadow, not born from rage, but from hunger. It devoured not just life, but history. Whole realities had vanished in its wake, and it was stirring again. The child turned. To Rhea, eyes wide, glowing. You heard me when no one did? That's why I brought you.
Got you.
You're not just warriors. You're memory keepers, story holders, and the galaxy will need that. Rhea stood silent, heart pounding. Everything she knew had changed. Earth was no longer just a small world among stars. It was now the keeper of something ancient. She looked. At her crew, humans, Thrask, Keller, and Zan saw the same awe on their faces. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were chosen. Outside, the structure began to shift. Power flowed through its walls. It was waking up, as if readying itself. One of the thrones lit up, its shape adjusting, not to hold a god, but a pilot, a commander. Rhea felt her steps moving on their own. She sat. The ship responded. Energy blasted through the sky. The other thrones lit up. One by one, members of her crew, those who had stood by her, bled beside her, sat, and the ship accepted them. This wasn't a weapon. It was a seed, spark, a beginning. The child smiled for the first time. The swarm was the test. Shadow will be the war. Rhea nodded, her voice steady, fierce. Then let them come. We'll be ready. And as the great structure lifted from the fog, rising like a sun reborn, the stars themselves seemed to make way for the species that had once been ignored, once overlooked, and now carried the fire of memory into the dark. Humanity was not just part of the galaxy now. It was its shield, its flame, its voice, and no one would ever be alone again.